The Trump budget impact on Ohio. Joining us on Columbus on the Record this week, Karen Kasler, State House Bureau Chief for Ohio Public Radio and TV, Gene Krebs, former state legislator, and Ray Miller, publisher of the Columbus African American. As a candidate, Donald Trump promised to shake up Washington, and based on his first budget, it's a promise kept, and it could have a big impact on Ohio. The president's budget pays for a $54 billion increase in military spending by slashing domestic programs. Some of that would have a big impact in Ohio. Cuts to the EPA would mean federal money to clean up Lake Erie would dry up. The budget eliminates the Appalachian Regional Commission, which serves Ohio and 12 other states. Ohio would lose more than $8.5 million in Meals on Wheels funding and about $2 million of arts funding that goes to arts groups and museums. Now, Ohio military contractors would seemingly stand to benefit from the increases in defense spending. Gene Krebs, you're a small government conservative. What do you make of this budget?
I think if you look at Trump's history of who he has been doing real estate deals, and he has a reputation for, I'd like to buy your building, I'll pay you $1, and then from there you begin negotiating. I think what you're seeing from here is real estate negotiations brought to the public policy arena. There will be a lot of doctoral theses written about how is this going to work or not.
Karen, do you really think that's what's going on, or is it the philosophical approach of his administration, saying let's cut all this stuff?
Well, his budget director has been saying that he took what Trump was saying on the road during the campaign and distilled it down into a budget. But I think that Gene is absolutely onto something. You hear about the Trump blueprint, and I think this is a start. I think it's a negotiation, and that's the thing that I've been hearing from other folks as well, that this is not set in stone. It can't be. There are too many people who have serious problems with it, Republicans and Democrats. I mean, even Republican Senator Rob Portman is really concerned about this budget for what it does with Lake Erie funding and the Great Lakes funding. Dave Joyce, the congressman from Northeast Ohio, same thing. So I think that Gene may be onto something here, that this is a negotiation, a starting point.
Ray, Democrats universally denounced the budget, but is there room to cut somewhere? These are tax dollars. There has to be room to shrink some of these programs.
I think there's always a need to look at the budget in terms of things that you need to cut, things that you need to eliminate. I certainly did when I chaired the various subcommittees of finance when I was a member of the General Assembly. The question I asked was, if this went away, then who would miss it? And oftentimes the response was silence, that those who are presenting really could not let you know. So I think there's going to be negotiations around many of the cuts that the president has proposed, even amongst his friends. Now, that's the sad thing. Those in an Appalachian Commission, as an example, they probably would not have thought that they'd be on the chopping block. But, the president proposes and the Congress disposes, so you always start at that point.
What about that, Gene? I mean, there have been studies saying that the counties that voted for Donald Trump, both with this and the health care bill, which we'll talk about in a moment, suffer the worst.
Yeah, and they do. But I think the thing to remember about legislation, not to get too emotionally invested in any legislation when it first comes out. I always say legislation's kind of like barn cats. Don't get emotionally attached to them, because one day they're just not there. You don't know the reason why. And with legislation, it's just going to completely and totally change. You're going to see a lot of different permutations of this. But what I keep going back to on this is, people kept saying, we want to see a businessman come and run the government. You're going to see a business type negotiation. The problem is so often in politics is that people don't negotiate on legislation. Ray's seen this too. You come out with a bill, they say, oh, we hate this. And then you can go ahead and meet with them afterwards and try to change it, and they go, well, I've already said I hate it, and it's harder then to get them to sign back off of it.
Just quickly, I think one of the saddest things for me to watch are the members of the Congress who are selling out. I mean, they're afraid of the president. They're afraid of him. They're afraid of whether or not they lose their position altogether. And it's a sad thing that I think when you put your career ahead of the needs of people, and a lot of people being
We've seen
hurt.
more daylight between GOP members of Congress now than we did between Democrats and President Obama. I mean, on the wiretapping scandal or allegations, on other things. I mean, Rob Portman coming out right out and saying this ain't going to work, the cutting of the EPA funding in Lake Erie. So there is some bit of daylight there.
No, and I think look at the Freedom Caucus to a large degree, still headed up by Ohio's Congressman Jim Jordan, that has said, well, we're not at all a fan of what he's proposed in many ways. I think we just have to wait and see. And also we have the debt limit coming up on us soon. We have to get an expansion of the debt limit. I just think this is, once again, there's going to be a lot of PhD dissertations written about this particular period in our history.
Military needs to be rebuilt. Does it need to be rebuilt, Karen? And will a 10% increase in its budget rebuild it?
Well, I guess we're about to find out, at least, again, if this negotiation continues. And I wanted to say, Gene, you know, my family raised a barn cat, and it stayed around for like 15 years. Okay. So some legislation does. And I'm just wondering how much of this actually will. How much of the idea of streamlining and changing government, which seems to be a lot of the impetus behind this, is, you know, the proposing of getting rid of agencies that have been around for a long time. There are a lot of people who want to see that, but a lot of people are, to what Ray's point was, making themselves known that they don't like this. I mean, you're seeing that all over social media.
Right, and now you have to negotiate in public, which is always much more difficult. And you have negotiations on this, you have negotiations on tax reform, you have negotiations going on his Supreme Court nominee, Gorsuch. So you have a lot of different balls in the air, and I think this is going to be a real test. If Trump can get through this and get much of what he wants, then I think we're in for, I think history will look at him more kindly than the editorial board of the New York Times. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's critically important that we not get caught up in process and politics and forget about the lives of people who are being hurt. And they're just hundreds of thousands of people, if not millions of people throughout the country who could be severely injured as a result of some of these cuts that are being proposed.
Or caught up in tweets that happen quite often on completely different subjects.
Next topic. Despite objections among some conservatives, the Republican-led House moved one step closer to overhauling the Affordable Care Act. Reports indicate the GOP health care plan would cost Ohio billions of dollars in federal funding. It would cap Medicaid spending for about 700,000 low-income Ohioans. It would eliminate, according to reports, more than $100 million in state public health programs. Still, nothing has been finalized, and the Senate and the White House all but promises changes to the House plan.
And it'll be open to amendment in the Senate, like all reconciliation bills are. We're anxious to get past the status quo.
If you can come with a good idea that will strengthen this bill, that will benefit American patients, we'll do it.
Karen Kassler, more studies out this week. They don't get any better for Ohio based on how they look at what could happen with this bill.
Right, you've got Medicaid spending overall, and then you've got specifically Medicaid expansion, 700,000 Ohioans on Medicaid expansion. And that, I think, is the big deal to people like Governor John Kasich, who's been out on the national stage talking about how keeping Medicaid expansion is critically important. He went out on a limb to get Medicaid expansion in the first place. A study from the Center for Community Solutions this week said to keep Medicaid expansion as it is would be $2 billion. And Kasich said earlier this week, that's not something the state can afford. And yet he's talked about how important it is for people who are drug addicted, are mentally ill, who have chronic diseases. So the state really is in a serious bind if indeed Medicaid expansion is pulled away. And I'm interested to find out what exactly the state plans to do. We're not hearing a whole lot of conversation about that at the State House, because I don't think, I mean, this could potentially happen right in the middle of budget negotiations in the conference committee.
And that's why I think that you may see, I have to commend the governor. He's been doing these mid-biennial reviews, MBRs. This time you may see an MBR on steroids because of what's going to happen at the federal level. But a lot of it plain depends. Will they convert Medicaid over into more of a block grant structure? You know, I mean, will we be able to pick, will states get more flexibility? I think this goes to what's going to happen at the federal level. What you're seeing here is a reaction to, with Obamacare, it violated what I call the 85-50-1 rule, which is you need to have 85% of the majority caucus voting yes, half of the minority caucus voting yes, and then signed by the one governor or the one president. Obamacare was rammed through. No Republicans were never asked to participate. Okay, so they went, okay, fine. And I think it's critical as this new program goes through, whatever you want to call it, AHCA, that you get and they reach out and try to get half of the Democrats.
Will they get half of the Republicans to
Well,
support
they don't
this?
get the half Republican support. You're not going to get any sort of a bill through. But then you're going to have political consequences of that when they go home because they said, vote for us, we're going to repeal Obamacare.
I think the governor certainly is to be commended for showing real courage and common sense. You know, I think it certainly lends to the experience he had in the state legislature as well as the Congress of the United States, you know, before becoming governor. And back to something I was saying earlier, to see so many people selling out, and he's basically putting himself out there politically, could end any hopes of any future runs for political office, and should be commended for that. I was on a call with the American Association of Retired People this morning, and when you talk about 52 million people being left uninsured based on what's being put forth by the administration, and the cost of prescription drugs going up, all of those kinds of things, there's no way that we could support that kind of an initiative that's coming forth from the administration. Too many people, as I said before, just being injured and severely hurt.
Then I go back to, I think this is negotiation.
Well, can they cut a deal? I mean, Obamacare went one way. This is going the opposite way. Is there a way for Democrats and Republicans to come together and come up with some kind of a fix to control cost? Because neither program controls the cost of health care, which drives everything.
Right. I don't know the answer to that because it seems like this is moving very quickly. As people will point out, the Affordable Care Act moved quickly. But, you know, Kasich is trying to step into this. But I think it's interesting. He wrote a letter this week with 3 other Republican governors, but only 3 other Republican governors. Out of all the Republican governors in this country, only 3 other ones joined him in expressing their concerns to Congress about Medicaid expansion in particular. And I mean, there were 31 states that did Medicaid expansion. Not all of them were Republicans, but you know, that means that there are a lot of states that are out here in this wilderness, so to speak, not knowing what's going to happen. And Kasich's trying to lead the charge, but I'm wondering how many people are coming along with him.
Gee, what do Republican congressmen do? I'm thinking of Bill Johnson down in Southeast Ohio. He was on NPR basically saying that Medicaid expansion has benefited his constituents along the Ohio River in rural Ohio. Can he, after promising to repeal Obamacare, vote for this and hurt his constituents?
I think, once again, what you see in front of you now will bear almost no resemblance to whatever it is that they pass at the end of the day. I think what you're going to have to see is something not dissimilar to what Ben Carson suggested, which is basically it's universal health savings accounts. Okay, what we're picking up is now after you give somebody an entitlement of a Medicaid expansion, it's very hard to pull that back and replace it with anything not as generous as that. And I think we'll have to come up with a completely new methodology. I think we will get here, and don't rule out the fact that what you may have seen from Paul Ryan et al. Is a strategy of putting something out, having that rejected, and then coming back with what they really want.
Ray, people say that these entitlements have to be reformed at some point. No matter what you do, it's going to be messy. Is this just the path we're on to try to straighten out Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security?
I'll come to the question, but actually I'm smiling because of Gene raising, what's his name?
Ben Carson.
Ben Carson, yeah, who thought that slaves are immigrants in America.
Now, hold on.
Great
Barack
neurosurgeon.
Obama made a not dissimilar statement, so we have to be fair
There's
here.
no way in the world Barack Obama would say something that insane.
Actually, he made a not dissimilar statement.
There's nothing.
All right, we'll
there's
get on
no
to
way
that
in the
next
world.
time.
But any event, what your question, Mike, was what?
Is this a way, maybe with a hammer or a sledgehammer, to reform an entitlement program? This type of proposal.
Well, it's hard for me to call, healthcare an entitlement. I mean, it's about time that we as a country, provided health insurance to all Americans. I think in the end, as Gene has said, there's going to be some compromise if everybody's being responsible.
You really think Democrats are willing to work with Republicans on this?
I think that there will be some working together. I think there'll be some compromise in the end. There's going to be a bill that's going to be enacted. It's not going to be what we have. It's not going to be the quote-unquote Obamacare, Affordable Care Act. And so they really are not going to have a choice other than working together.
I think everybody's in a tough position too because 2018 is just around the corner, the midterm elections. And so I think a lot of people, sadly enough, are looking at the midterm elections thinking, how is this going to affect my reelection? Though most people, at least in Congress in Ohio, are in very, very safe seats.
I think Democrats might wait until 2019 to work with Democrats on health care, but just to say. Suddenly, the Democratic field for governor is getting crowded. Connie Pillich became the third Democrat to enter the 2018 race. It's the second statewide campaign for the former state rep who spent 3 terms in the House representing the Cincinnati area. In 2014, she ran for state treasurer but lost to Republican Josh Mandel in his reelection bid. Pillich joins Senate Minority Leader Joe Schiavone and former Congresswoman Betty Sutton. Mike DeWine, John Husted, Mary Taylor, and Jim Renacci are all talking about running on the Republican side. Karen Kasler, who has the edge of those 3 candidates right now? We know that more might come in, but of those 3 right now, does anybody have an edge?
I don't think so. And this reminds me of 2006 when we had the first open race for governor because Bob Taft was term limited and you had a lot of people flooding in, a lot of people showing an interest. The race changed a lot between the beginning of that campaign and when Ted Strickland actually became the nominee. So I think you're seeing some of that happen right now. Some people are getting out there, getting their names known. I mean, I talked to Connie Pillich this week. She says she's in to run for governor. But we've got, 18, 19 months till the election. We've got we've got more than a year until the primary, which will be in May of next year. A lot of things can change in that period of time.
The 3, I think the 3 most viable, the 3 biggest candidates they could probably have not yet done anything, and that would be, first of all, Judge Jennifer Brunner, who's run for, was Secretary of State for the D's and also was a candidate for the Democrats for the U.S. Senate. She has 200,000 email addresses, okay? So she has a very formidable organization. Nan Whaley, the mayor of Dayton, has been doing a lot of outreach up in Cleveland. And probably the most charismatic Democrat in Ohio was former mayor of Youngstown, Jay Williams, who's getting no play. But I think that as an African American, much like Barack Obama did, he has tremendous appeal within a classic primary structure, and I expect him to do extremely well with the African American community.
There are 2 other names that I want to throw out there. Supreme Court Justice Bill O'Neill, though there are some questions about whether a Supreme Court justice has enough name recognition to really run. But
O'Neill helps.
O'Neill helps a lot.
On St. Patrick's Day.
Exactly. Yes. And then, of course, Richard Cordray, the head of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, who may or may not have his job in a couple of weeks.
But Trump can
we don't
only
know.
fire him with cause.
Well, yes, but I know certainly that Cordray has been talking about wanting to keep that job. He really does enjoy his work there and thinks it's important.
I think at the end of the day, it'll be Cordray versus Husted when it's all said and done. I think the person who no, I think the person who could have the greatest impact on the race, particularly on the Democratic side, is former Senator Nina Turner. Nina's a dynamic person, an awesome speaker, and loves politics, so she'll be all over. She already is all over the state of Ohio, so she could influence things, but I think the candidates are going to be Cordray versus Hughes.
Has she hurt her chances, though, because of her support for Bernie Sanders over Hillary Clinton?
I think she probably strengthened her chances because of that grassroots support that she would get from them.
We've mentioned several women candidates on the Democratic side especially. Ray, given what we saw with the Women's March after the Trump inauguration and the mobilization of these indivisible groups and Democrats getting fired up, especially women Democrats, would it be wise for a Democrat to nominate a woman to run for governor in 2018 when there could be some momentum for female candidates?
I don't think you kind of look at segments of the population. I think you look at who can raise the dollars, who can get the support broadly from Ohioans, and I think that's Cordray on the Democratic side. I really do think it's done, essentially.
But I think if the D's are smart, they have 2 choices. Either they elect a mini Trump, i.e. somebody who can bring back the white working class into their fold, or somebody who is the anti-Trump, who completely defines the difference. I think they have to make that choice. So of that, I think they're going to go with either a woman or an African American.
Our last topic, a startling statistic. The murder rate in Columbus is 3 times higher than the murder rate in New York City. Last year in Columbus, for every 100,000 residents, 12 people were murdered. In New York, it was 4. While the murder rate ticked up slightly last year in Columbus, overall violent crime is down in Central Ohio and across the country. Ray Miller, you know, there's always, such a complex issue as to why murder rates go up and down. There's economics, there's policing, there's social concerns. What do you think is going on in the city of Columbus?
You know, it's interesting looking at this issue. Years ago, we used to look at the Column Post newspaper and the number of people, you know, every week who are being murdered. Now you look at the Columbus Dispatch every day, and it looks like the old Column Post in terms of the number of people being murdered every day. I think it has a lot to do with the opiate crisis, without question. It has a lot to do with poverty, the increasing rate of poverty in our state, and a number of other, you know, drug-related kinds of issues. What can be done about it, I think, is a solutions-oriented approach, coming to the table not just to discuss these issues, but specifically what can be done about it. Increasing appropriations for drug treatment. Yeah, that's something certainly that can be helpful, but then you've got to have the support from a segment of the population and members of the General Assembly who have not been willing henceforth to come forward.
Gene, it's hard to put a finger on why Columbus is worse than, say, New York City. I don't know what New York City is doing. I didn't do any research as to what their approach is, but I know they had the Rudy Giuliani had the subway jumper, broken windows type policing, which was criticized and or thrown out in court. And what is the solution?
It is multifaceted. It requires not a silver bullet, it requires silver buckshot. You have to look at, yes, you can do treatment, but you have to be careful that you just don't focus on the symptoms. You have to get to what is some of the core problems going on with this. I think you have to look at, for the poor and working poor, the decline of good jobs. I think you have to look at the a affordable housing structure that ironically leads to unaffordable housing. I think that it's a target-rich environment. I think that right now, in the last budget, if you look at overall, the state currently spends $1 billion on drug issues, in some form or fashion. The question is then, all right, so what more? I mean, putting more money on this, more appropriations may not do the trick. It may require some other aspects of this, of getting into and meeting with these people on a more personalized basis, much through a Bridges Out of Poverty program.
I totally agree. It's just that it has to be done with a sense of urgency. We just can't sit around and talk about it when people are dying at these. In the Dispatch today, the coroner for the state, for the county, Ortiz, is saying that a life is lost in Columbus every day to opiates. And that's somebody's father, somebody's brother, and so forth that is no longer with us. And so there has to be a sense of urgency. I think everything that you said, Gene, is exactly right. You've got to deal with jobs. You've got to deal with all of the other kinds of support services that one needs within their family.
So, Karen, what's going on in the State House with this? Is there extra money coming in for treatment for opiate addiction, for increased policing?
We have been warned for a while that this was going to be a tough budget, and so there are a lot of areas that have not seen increases. We've not seen increases in, say, children's services, significant increases that are helping with the opiate crisis. We're not seeing the increases that a lot of these entities really want to see. And so, there's a lot more going on here than just the opiate crisis, and I'm not sure that there's a whole lot of conversation.
Ray, real quick, just a few seconds left, but where does policing fall into this? The mayor has expanded the intensive police effort year-round now. Some say the policing has backed off because of the high-profile videos that have been out there. Where does policing play a role in this?
It definitely plays a role to have a police presence, but you can't do it in a way that's going to turn off the community. And I think we've got some pushback in the city of Columbus right now as a result of our mayor, Andrew Ginther, targeting certain communities. And so everything has to be done in a balanced kind of a way, but action has to be taken.
All right, let's get to our weekly final off-the-record parting shots. Gene Krebs, Ray Miller, you're up first, alphabetical.
Parting shots. Nina Turner is going to do far better than most people think for governor of the state of Ohio in next statewide race.
So you think she's going to run?
Oh, absolutely.
It would be fun, Gene. Gene.
One of our goals on this show is to part the curtain and kind of give people a hint out there for Bobby and Betty Buckeye how things actually work. I chair the governing board of the Ohio Consumers Council. It came out with a legislative briefing book on utility issues. It's written so everybody can understand it, those who are not policy experts, and you can go to the Consumers Council website, you can find it, and I think you may want to put it on your site too.
I'll put it on our Facebook page.
Okay?
You promise it's good reading?
Yes, it is. Actually, it is good reading for policy wonk world. Yes.
Okay. All right. There you go.
That's a qualifier right there.
Yes.
I'll tell you.
Yes.
Karen.
Well, this coming week, piggybacking on what Ray was just saying, actually what we were just talking about, poverty, the Ohio Association of Community Action Agencies will put out their State of Poverty annual report coming up next week. And last year's report was really eye-opening. It said that 1 in 6 Ohioans live in poverty, 1 in 3 are in rural or urban areas rather. And in Columbus, the population increased by 22% over 13 years, but the population in poverty in that 13-year period increased by 113%. So it's a big, big deal.
All right. Don't want to jinx them, but I have not mentioned their name all year, but a certain team that plays on a very slippery surface is near the top of the NHL, set records for wins and home wins, so continued success to whatever that team name is. That is Columbus on the Record for this week. Check us out online. Continue the discussion on Facebook, Twitter, our website, wosu.org/COTR. For our crew, especially our director, George Levert, who is back after an absence, and our panel, I'm Mike Thompson. Have a good week.